We're so thrilled to see such a wonderful group of you here, and again, our huge thanks to Temple University, to partners with us to enable us to do this. This is now the third year, I think, that you've been at Temple, and it's a wonderful venue. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I want to give a special thanks to the most wonderful staff anyone in the world could have. The teamwork among them and their individual talents are remarkable. So hats off to Diane Adverso, Dina Gamble, Jen Coburn, Sadia Ulamin, Naomi Longo, Jack Dennison, Courtney Cooper-Smith, Chelsea Reed, Chris String, and Priya Patel, and our volunteers. We have several volunteers who have joined in. Would you give them a real they each of them have at least 3.5 full-time positions, and they manage to pull it off. And when they report to the city on their timesheets, they're doing it all in 7.5 hours a day. I don't know how they do it. I am really honored that Lou GIORLA, Commissioner of Prisons in the City of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia prison system, is with us today. He's a remarkable leader, and he's done some really amazing things. He has been Commissioner of the Philadelphia prison system since 2008. Prior to that, he had been a warden in each of 2 correctional facilities. He began his career as an officer at the House of Correction in 1982, rising to warden, and he's also been Director of Prisons Internal Affairs Division and a Deputy Warden at Alternative and Special Detentions before being promoted to warden in 2005. He's the son of a correctional officer, and he attended Northeast High. This is one Philadelphia guy. Northeast Catholic High School, earned his associate's degree in criminal justice at Community College, Philadelphia. And his wife is a former PPS employee. It's all in the family. Are your kids in the same business too?
Not yet.
Not yet. And he has 3 children, 6 grandchildren. He's a remarkable leader. He really is, and he has a remarkable staff. We have been privileged at the Mayor's Commission to be working closely with Deputy Commissioner Blanche Carney and with Lieutenant Jaylene Brister. And Jaylene, where are you?
She's on her way.
She's on her way, and her wonderful staff. Would you, the ladies in the uniforms, come on. We've been working with this fantastic group of people for just over a year now to help get a My Place campus installed in the Philadelphia prison system, and it's going to open on Monday. And what's so incredible about this is that when the folks are released back to the community, we will have their entire academic transcript, and we can just pick them right up and put them back into classes immediately. If they've started online inside PBS, when they come out, we can just continue that class right away. There's no need to worry about where they are, what they learned, what they did. We'll have all that information, and we'll be able to continue to help them. So our goal, I think, is very close to Commissioner GIORLA's goal. It's a very simple one. He really doesn't want to see these guys again, right?
Absolutely.
All right. And we want these folks to succeed in the community, and we're partnering with the most marvelous staff on earth at PBS to do that. So we're very thrilled to do that, and here to talk to you about what the Commissioner's vision was when he became Commissioner and how he's gone about doing what he's done, to tell you about that in his world of technology.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Dr. Rainey. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. As you can tell, I'm not an educator. I'm not an IT person. So I just want to relate to you some of our experiences, not only in education and technology, that have happened during my tenure as commissioner, because we've faced some challenges, we've had some surprises, and we've really had some great advancements. As Dr. Rainey mentioned, when I first became commissioner, it wasn't an intended choice. I was asked to sit in temporarily as an interim until a final candidate had been found. After about 3 months, the city officials were unsatisfied with their search, and I applied as well, and they selected me from a group of 3 candidates, and I was honored, and I was really thrilled to take over the prison. But at the time, my background was primarily in security. I really didn't understand our goals. And I was fortunate under this administration, Mayor Nutter brought in a new managing director by the name of Camille Cates Barnett. And she was a rather strong, determined woman who had specific ideas about how municipal government should perform. And one of the things she talked about, were that all municipal government was a service, and everyone had a job to do in relation to the citizenry. Whether it's the police department, the fire department, L&I, whether it's the mayor's commission on literacy, whoever it is, has a role to play. And we all sat around in a meeting, and they said, she said, you have to develop customer service standards for your department. And I kind of looked around and I said, well, what's a customer service standard for a prison? And I joked, I said, well, nobody escaped last night, we're good, right? Okay, that's service to the community, everybody's supposed to be there, is there. And then we looked a little deeper. We have 2 roles. As correctional providers and correctional professionals, we have 2 roles. First one is custody, because people are committed to our care. The second one is rehabilitation. And we have to try and establish programs, services, and activities so that no one spends any, not idle, but useless time while being incarcerated, regardless of who they are or what their challenges are. Now, we have a very large population that's split between pretrial detainees who really don't have any legal obligation or statutory obligation to participate in the program. And then we have a sentenced population, which is about 25% of the roughly 8,000 people we have in custody. And they have an obligation to take part. They have to work if we tell them to. The judges usually stipulate some type of program involvement. Tell them, sign up for a GED course, take drug and alcohol counseling, do whatever you have to do so you can meet the terms of your sentence. And we looked at those populations separately. And as a customer service standard, we tried to measure the level of participation. And at the time, our level of participation, which we isolated for the sentenced inmates, because they're obligated to participate, was dismal. There was between a 35 and 50% participation rate in the prisons in educational, vocational, or training programs for sentenced inmates. And it was pretty embarrassing because they legally have to participate. We have the means to help them participate. It wasn't happening. So we began to measure. We assembled all our wardens, we brought them together and said, first thing we're going to look at is the available programs and slots that you have in your facilities. And we looked at them to see what was pertinent and what wasn't. And we shut some down and we broadened some. We made additional slots available. Second thing was that once we made the additional slots available, we looked at attendance. And we looked at how attendance happens. Now, I don't know how many, if any of you, worked in corrections or ever been in a prison, but trying to do programming in a prison is trying to walk uphill in a driving rainstorm through the mud. Because there are certain things that have to happen, and they generally don't, they're not conducive to the things you want to do. Every morning, we have to wake everybody up and we have to serve meals. After meals, we have to issue medication. Just before that, we have to take a whole load of people and load them on sheriff's buses and get them to court. And then after the medication, we finally start programming. So there's a very narrow window that you can use to facilitate programs. But we kind of rode herd over it. We asked all the wardens to supply information on how many attendees and what percentages were happening in their facilities. and it started to grow. We looked at content and interest on the part of the inmates, and we found that there were some programs that really not only didn't generate interest, but didn't really have a basis in what we were trying to accomplish. And as the participation grew, we looked at other ways to expand the programs. So in 2008, when I started, our average daily population was about 9,100 inmates. In 2009, because of a number of things, court processes that were a little more lengthy than they are today, anti-crime initiatives in the city, our population swelled. So we went from about 9,100 inmates to nearly 10,000 inmates. Now, to put that in perspective, we had 6 facilities operating on State Road. We had 4 satellites in the community. We actually had inmates in Passaic and Monmouth counties, New Jersey, because we simply didn't have the room. Our bed space was about 6,900 inmates, and we just couldn't fit them in. Now, the reason I mention that is not only because of the challenges it provides in just simply managing people and supplying services, but areas within our facilities, such as classrooms, auditoriums, gyms, other spaces, some of them were actually converted to housing. We had activity rooms that had bunks in them, and we had full bathrooms. We had gyms where we spent very little time recreating because all our staff were committed to keeping an eye on the inmates. And every time a bed became empty, and we monitored that shift by shift, I can tell you on any given day, at any given time of day, how many available beds we had in the facility. And sometimes they got into double digits, 10 or 12 beds left in the facility. And we kind of crossed our fingers and splintered it out. So that made programming, in some cases, nearly impossible, because we couldn't provide cohorts of inmates to study and work in a classroom. We didn't necessarily have computer labs and other equipment in all of our facilities where the inmates could just simply go to the classroom. Some of them were housed in other facilities, and we couldn't move them back into the appropriate areas. So we began not only to try and control our population, but we wanted to brainstorm and determine how we could facilitate programming under these circumstances. 2 of the things we looked at were first our educational programs, the other were our vocational programs. All of our vocational programs at the time were very good at making use of inmate activities in our facilities. All our janitorial services are supplied by the inmates. A lot of our labor and assistance to our maintenance staff are supplied by the inmate labor in the facilities. It keeps our costs down, it gives them worthwhile activity, and they can earn a little money, which they use to spend on their inmate accounts. So as we looked at those programs, we began to make sure that we tried to have other means so that everyone could remain active. And as the programs developed, we began to wonder why we weren't seeing participation in some areas and why we had some challenges, particularly in education. We had a very robust GED program at the time. We used computer-based education, and we used studying with mentors to try and educate, test, and have inmates achieve their GEDs. But it was very small. It was a very small percentage of our total sentence population. So we were wondering why. And believe it or not, up till that time, we hadn't done any evaluation or proficiency testing of the inmates that came through our doors. We did health assessments. We did mental health assessments. We did classifications for security reasons, but we never looked at their skills. And we relied strictly on self-reporting. And everybody came through the door was a high school graduate. It was amazing. And unfortunately, over time, I've been here 33 years, and I've looked through a lot of written material that inmates have generated. And when I first started, the inmates, I'd say, who were in their 20s and 30s could write a paragraph. They could express a thought. They could articulate their concerns. And I saw that deteriorating over time. And in my role as commissioner, I saw that men in their 20s and 30s, women in their 40s, that were unable simply to write a couple lines on a piece of paper to communicate and write, and it was scary. we were talking about that briefly before I began my remarks. And it was scary because at that point in time, we're turning them back out in the community. And if we don't size up their needs, if we don't address them, or at least begin to address them, when they come through the door, we're wasting our time. Incarceration becomes a period of suspended animation. So we looked at doing some proficiency testing. We had a few dollars left in a grant, and we did some tape testing for sentence inmates. We scheduled, I think it was 500 inmates for tape testing, and it ended up that we, after it was voluntary, of course. After some of the individuals that wanted to participate, we ended up with a group of 279. Of those, many of them came into the room, looked at the material, and realized they couldn't do it, and they left. The smaller group that we tested gave us some really disappointing and dismal results. Even though we relied totally on self-reporting and we knew that was exaggerated, we did believe that the average proficiency, or reading proficiency, or math proficiency, was at least 8th grade level. It wasn't. It wasn't. It was more like 4th grade and 2nd grade. And you know that was a little shocking, but it was a reality check for us. So we realized we had to expand. At the time, as you know, the recession hit. So just about all the city agencies, all the government agencies were being cut. And all of our efforts, none of our efforts were being funded. If you look at our budget for the prisons, we have about a $240 million operating budget annually. But only $1 million of that is committed to vocational services. And we have a pretty broad vocational program run through JEBS. But the rest of our services are funded by what we call the inmate welfare funds. And those are the proceeds of inmate purchases at our inmate commissary. The money that they earn and the money that's sent to them, they purchase things in the institutional store, and our commission from that goes into programming. The reason I mention that is because during that financial crisis, we were given scenarios to prepare for the mayor's office. What would your services look like if you cut 10%? What would they look like if you cut 20%? What would it look like if you cut 30%? Well, I'll tell you, 30%, we were just going to lock the doors and go home. Because there really wasn't anything left. We established a set of priorities, and they started with security, basically locking the doors, and then medical care, food service, our cord production and our records, and there was no room left for programming. So we pushed a lot of our expenses onto that inmate welfare fund, and it saved us because we instituted vocational programs in horticulture. We instituted vocational programs in dog training, in a couple other areas. And what we did was, each of those programs had to include both an in-custody component, a post-release component, and some follow-up and employment. So that gave us the opportunity to reach all those inmates in the sentence population. Now remember what I said in the beginning? Our participation was dismal, it was about 35 to 50%. Our last quarter participation, I just submitted the figures yesterday, with 82% participation. No, it's actually called New Leash on Life. It's a rescue dog training program. The dogs get adopted, the inmates get internships at local shelters, local animal shelters, and they have a 10-week training program on us. And there are wraparound services included in that as well, social services and job placement. But in order for us to provide the literacy program that we need, we expanded the educational spectrum that we had. Like I said, we were real proud of the GED. We were kind of full of ourselves because we thought, well, people have GEDs in jail. It's great. Sounds good. But what about those individuals who couldn't even enter the program? What about those individuals that may be more advanced than the program itself? So we developed a pre-literacy program that enabled those who couldn't even read to be engaged. And we brought them in at that level. Then a pre-GED prep program so you could prepare for the GED prep. And then finally, we even expanded it out. We found that there was a small cohort that was college eligible. We brought in the Community College of Philadelphia, through their REACH program, and surprisingly, one of the things we found out, this was really good news to us, was that the inmates, unless they were convicted of felonies, they were eligible for grant money. So while in custody, they could start their education, and when they leave, be enrolled in Community College of Philadelphia. I don't know how many people we've pushed through that course in the last, it's a 12-credit course that we deliver while in custody. I think maybe 50 or 60 inmates have participated, and in the last 3 years, I think at least 4 have achieved their associate's degrees. So, now, in-house, the educational literacy programs we have face their own challenges. Dated computer equipment. Like I said, facilities that were so crowded, the classroom wasn't available, or you couldn't get enough people to the classroom to train or be involved in their programming. And at the same time, a number of the educational programs that we had were antiquated. They were no longer, the books no longer were available. The discs and the hard copy material that we used to load in our computer stations were no longer available. A lot of the vendors were going to web-based web-based sources for their information. And when we reviewed it, we thought it was a great idea because there's so much available on the internet. There's so much content that we could readily access. It would be great. It wouldn't have to be put through our procurement process, and that's a whole other lecture after that. So, you know, we started looking at those resources, and around the same time, we were informed that the GED test was no longer going to be given hard copy. We were going to have to do it online, and we were really distressed over that because we had the process in place. It was working really well, and what we found out was that web access to inmates is not a very popular subject in government. Now, like I said, I spent 30 years in prison as a security officer, and I thought, not being anyone involved with technology, that this is a doable thing to have limited, secure internet access for inmates in prison. I began researching it, and I'm a member of the American Jail Association, American Correctional Association, Association of State Correctional Administrators, all the prison heads from around the country. And what I found was there were about 3 active, actual internet access programs for inmates around the country.
Wow.
I was shocked. There was one in Arizona. I think there was one maybe in Wisconsin, and we were proposing the 3rd. So not only did it sound fantastic, and it sounded like a new way to make a great advance, not only for our city, because as you know, our mayor is very progressive, and he gave us a list of goals when he started this administration. And one of them was to increase the educational attainment of the citizenry of the city of Philadelphia, especially those who are incarcerated. So when I looked around, my technical staff, our MIS director, I called him in, and I said, I want you to research whether in fact we can have secure, limited internet access in the prisons for the inmates. And he was on board. He's one of the, I don't know if anybody's ever met him, but Zach Wilkerson, he's one of the most imaginative and hardworking IT directors that we've ever had. And whatever challenge you present him with, he's going to find a way to get it done. So he worked up a scenario and a solution. He submitted it to the Office of Innovation and Technology in the city. They said, okay, we'll do it, and of course they gave us the price tag, which really was surprisingly low. I thought it was amazing. It was less than $50,000. I thought that was a bar. And well, after that happened, we said, okay. I said, well, run with it. Let's go. Let's start it up. We have the hardware in place. We have the staff in place. They can do it. Let's run with it. I got a call. It's been disapproved. Well, who disapproved it? The law department. So we held a meeting, and we asked them, well, what are your concerns? Well, our concerns are hacking and compromising of your local area network and the city network. So again, we sat down with the IT folks and we said, here's what we'll do. We already have an inmate local area network. It's separate from our production network for inmate management. It's somewhat connected to the city net, but not totally connected to the city net, because there are firewalls that they tell us will prevent any hacking or any compromise of the information. And the lawyer said, well, that's really great, but we don't think so. It took nearly a year and a half to convince them, and I brought in the director of risk management, who manages all the contracts for the city as far as what our liability is. A lawyer from one of our contracts lawyers from the law department, and we just sat down at the table, and I told them, we're going to find a way to work this out, and we're going to do whatever you need to do, or prove whatever we need to prove, and then we're going to go ahead with it. We struggled. We looked at some products, and surprisingly enough, like I said, money wasn't the problem. After having to refresh our computer stations in the jails, upgrade some of our software, install some new, and technical people, you can correct me, switches around our facilities, we finally were capable of running the internet in the inmate areas. Not yet. Not yet. Somewhere along the way, another thing happened. We applied for instructors to flesh out this program, and we wanted to hire people who were technically qualified to deliver the educational program. And the city said no. We don't have the money in the budget to do that. So we did what we always do in corrections. We looked around for people who wear uniforms, have interest, and are qualified and willing to be trained and work in these positions so that we can be successful. Over the years, we've had correctional officers who worked as electricians and plumbers and bricklayers and everything, because in a jail, nothing stops. Everything goes on 24 hours a day, whether people know it or not, whether people care or not, what happens, you have to run. The jail, I used to have an old supervisor said, if you leave today, the jail's going to run. If you come back, if you fall down, they're going to walk over you, the jail's going to run. So we had to make the jail run, and it was one of our goals to not only involve all the inmates in this program, but also to make sure that they were a success. The only way to do that for us was to establish the internet, the internet access for the inmates in the prisons. Finally, Monday, we hope to reach that realization, and it's been a long and difficult road. The amount of opportunity that we feel we can provide, the amount of content we can access, we think is going to really enable our educational programs to explode. One of the things along the way, we were approached, the mayor's office opened a lot of new technical initiatives for the city. One of them was called the Office of New Urban Mechanics. And they did a program called Fast Forward, where they cast a net out for entrepreneurs and say, what do you want to do, and what technological solutions do you have that will help city government and help urban governments solve their problems? So they brought in a bunch of entrepreneurs. One of them was a tablet education program called Jail Education Solutions. And they're in a pilot program right now, because what it gives us the opportunity to do now, we can give an inmate a hardened tablet that they can work on anywhere in our facilities. And as I mentioned, those challenges with classrooms and equipment, they still exist. So we're piloting the program at one facility. We hope to expand it to 2 additional facilities in the next couple of weeks, where the inmates will be able to pick up the tablet in the morning. They have content that is educational, entertaining, has proficiency testing, and will permanently record their progress when they turn it in. So there's a case management aspect to it. What we're looking at is eventually modifying or improving that, so that when every inmate comes through the door, we're going to give them a device. That device is going to have our inmate handbook in it. That device is going to have the information they need to apply for programs. That device is going to have information on there how they can access all of our services in the facility, whether it's a request to staff or a sick call slip or some other service request. And something we discussed early on was that if they take part in programming, if their behavior is good, that maybe when they leave the facility, they'll take it with them. And everything they earned, everything that they learned, and everything that they worked on will be in their hands. That's our goal. It's been a long and difficult road. I want to thank Dr. Rainey and the Mayor's Commission on Literacy because, like I said, we didn't have a lot of operating funds to establish these programs. And what happened was we looked at existing city resources and the services that they had and then brought them into work with us. And I have to apologize to Dr. Rainey because, like I said, programming in correctional facilities is a very big challenge. It's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to get discouraged. Just when you think you made some progress, you're 2 steps back, but you have to keep plugging. And I want to thank Dr. Rainey and her staff because they have kept plugging. We wouldn't be where we are today without their help. So that's our story to date. I hope that somebody can come talk to you next year and regale you with some tales of even more success. I hope that we can not only raise the literacy level, we can raise the proficiency level, we could offer even more academic content, and we can lower our recidivism rate at the same time.
Okay, that's it.
It's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much.
We have a couple of minutes, yes, to Ms. Rainey. Yes. No. We have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask the commissioner? Yes?
I'm sure you've thought of this, but do you have a way to follow these folks who've been successful, who participated in the program, and do you have a way to track them and see how they're doing?
After release?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no. Not a good one. We do have the Mayor's Office of Reintegration for Services for Ex-Offenders, RISE, is now an arm of the prisons and will be permanently an arm of the prisons in July. They offer case management and referral services post-release, and they do retain records of progress and employment retention for those individuals who go there, but it's entirely voluntary. One of the things that we don't have in the criminal justice system or in the city is a cradle-to-grave record of somebody's involvement in criminal justice. Because of privacy concerns and other technical incompatibilities between the agencies, you're not able to look and see if someone has had or needs mental treatment, if someone has had or needs certain educational services. It's somewhat difficult. I know there are a lot of concerns about the Big Brother aspect of it and having, gathering information, but it would be very helpful to us in the criminal justice system to be able to look at what somebody's done, how much progress they've made, quickly assess their needs, and place them in a treatment program or in some services that would benefit them immediately. Right now, unfortunately, we're not there.
Just to add to that, the Philadelphia Reentry Coalition is doing a fantastic job working with the Philadelphia prison system, with the federal and state prison systems, with Department of Corrections at the state level, with everybody in the city of Philadelphia, nonprofits, public agencies, and Sue Hoffman's here from the workforce, Philadelphia Workforce, Philadelphia Works Incorporated, and many other partners. We're all working on it, and that's the biggest juggernaut issue is information sharing for several reasons. One is the privacy issues, but one is also just plain old-fashioned efficiency, so that you're not retesting somebody for the third time that month, we're asking the same set of questions of this one person over and over and over again. So we're struggling with this. I think it's a national issue, and I think there's some movement from the Department of Justice towards looking at some models for information sharing.
There are, as Dr. Rainey mentioned, it's a very broad coalition of partners that we have here, from the U.S. Attorney's Office down to local adult probation and parole. And the information sharing, the CJIS system, Combined Justice Information System, is hoping to address some of those problems. Locally, we're trying to do our own. We're trying to make ourselves compatible with the First Judicial District Court's adult probation and parole. Philadelphia has somewhat of an antiquated justice system because things develop separately over a course of 300 plus years. Our sheriff's office is really an elected arm that we really don't communicate with regularly. The courts supervise probation and parole here in the county, which, unlike other jurisdictions where corrections and probation and parole are combined, the information sharing, they work in the same system. We're hoping to address that, bring those agencies together so that we can provide a better service. It's got to be really discouraging for someone who leaves our custody, especially if they've taken part in programs and they walk into an office and somebody says, well, I have something for you, and they give them a list of programs that they've already participated in. And we want to try and avoid that. We want to try to avoid the redundancy. We want to try and make the placement immediate. What Dr. Rainey mentioned, when somebody leaves our custody, they can go to the Mayor's Commission.
We already have their data. We already have their data.
And they're familiar with the program. Yeah. So we've always been hoping for that, what we call a seamless transition in reentry. And that's our goal.
Last question.
When you leave the city and go to, if you move to the state, is there any carryover? In education programs or?
That's one of the things we're working for that hasn't been in the past. They do a needs and risk assessment upon admission. Their process is longer because most people are committed there for 2 years and their classification process takes nearly 6 months. They do program placement at that. We're in the process of trying to close that gap, so we can provide them with more or less a progress report, what someone's done in our custody. They can pick up the ball.
Thank you again, and a huge thank you for a visionary leader. He's actually, it took a while, but as he said, he's put something in place here, and it's really exciting, using technology to make sure his customers don't return. It is my pleasure now, it's my great pleasure to introduce the redoubtable, the amazing, the awesome Jen Cobra, Associate Director of the Mayor's Commission on Liberty, who will lead the panel.